guys, what's happening? Welcome back to the channel and welcome to another edition of Transfer Window Weekly. And it's the end of the first week of the transfer window pretty much. And there have been some big deals taking place. Liverpool signing Darwin Núñez from Benfica. Sadio Mane obviously ever closer to his move to Bayern Munich. Spurs are signing a lot of players. Yves Bissouma, the latest one to join them, alongside Ivan Perisic and Fraser Forster in goal. Even Arsenal doing bits in the transfer market as well, signing Fabio Vieira from Porto, the midfield player, for £34 million. But George, seems to be a familiar story for Chelsea at the moment. Lots of interested in, linked to, admire, fans, like, extensively scouted, all different words of saying that Chelsea kind of looked at players. But at the moment, at least publicly, it doesn't seem like we're doing anything. Obviously, we spoke last week and we kind of weren't too concerned, as long as sort of business was done by pre-season and the majority of the players were in to have a full pre-season to give them the best chance of settling in. Another week's gone by and plenty of rumours doing the rounds, but nothing really concrete in any players coming in. We've got a lot of players that we need to bring in. Are you a little bit more concerned than you were this time last week?
A little bit. It's not ready to push the panic button just yet. I mean, the only thing that's been heating up this week is the weather. It's not been the transfer window for Chelsea, is it? We always tend to stumble across these transfer windows. I think, we have to accept that the squad's quite, top heavy at the moment. So we're probably looking at getting players out before bringing players in. That's probably the first point to say. But yeah, it's not easy to watch people doing immediate business in the first week and some serious business, tied up in the first week of the window. And again, Chelsea failing to really at least inquire publicly about any of these targets. I'm sure Thomas Tuchel and, the people above have got a list in place and targets, but, you don't want to leave it too late. And, as the weeks go on, yes, we've got time, and I'm not pushing the panic button just yet, but you've got to get a move on, particularly with the bigger moves. It doesn't happen overnight. It takes a lot of negotiations. So I'm hoping that it's just being done behind closed doors. But as is the world these days of social media, if something was happening, we'd probably hear about it. So it is concerning to that degree.
I mean, you do see business done that, like, you don't really hear any rumours about, like, suddenly Arsenal signed Vieira from Porto. There was no real links about that. Things do come out the woodwork. Bissouma to Spurs kind of appeared from nowhere, really. But, like, when you're a massive club like Chelsea, generally, if something concrete is about to happen, you do normally tend to hear about it. It's quite hard to keep things under wraps. I'm not saying that nothing's going on behind the scenes. I'm sure they're working very hard behind the scenes, but at least publicly, there doesn't seem to be an awful lot going on. I mean, it's not just incomings that are a concern to me. George, how concerned are you also that, with a bloated squad, we've got a lot of players that we need to get rid of in terms of that are surplus to requirements or not of the required quality to be here? How concerned are you that we've not managed to ship anyone out either yet? Because that as well is a big problem. Because as you said, as you touched on earlier, it's going to be obviously not in defence, it's not going to be a problem, but certainly in potentially midfield and definitely in the attacking positions, it's very much operating a one in, one out policy. So the outgoings, particularly higher up the pitch, are really important if we're going to actually bring anyone in.
Well, this is what's so interesting about this window, because we really don't know what Chelsea's point of attack is going to be next season, whether we're going to have a formational change or we've got a lot of players that play in similar types of areas of the pitch, particularly in the forward line. So, again, players that haven't been there that long, potentially. We've documented that last week with the likes of, Ziyech, Pulisic, all playing in the same kind of role. But, are they on that ship out list, or do we give them another year? Chelsea went very, very heavy in the market a couple of years back with the likes of Havertz, Pulisic, the list goes on, Werner, for a long-term project. Now, obviously, those results haven't come to fruition yet, but I think the backing was that Frank Lampard was going to stay on and grow along with the players. That didn't work. That didn't happen. And now we're in a situation where we've got a lot of players, congested in all areas of the pitch. And, what do we do? It's hard to ship these players out because they're on big contracts, big wages. They're not obligated to move. Clubs, are not going to take those players unless it's a huge discounted fee, which Chelsea would obviously, business terms, don't want to lose out too much. So it's a vicious cycle. But I agree, mate. I think, we've probably got to ship a few players on before we we recruit, because as you said, Chelsea have gone down a different model of one in, one out. So it's not the old day where we can just go bash, bash, bash and go for those players.
Yeah, it is an issue, but I mean, I guess I don't know. It is congested and it's difficult, but I think it's got to the point now, mate. I know Marina Granovskaya, who's kind of in charge of transfers, negotiating fees, deals, etc. It's a new ownership now, so kind of a lot of the players that we're looking to move on were kind of bought in under old money, kind of quote unquote. So it's not actually out of the new owners' pockets. I think we're getting to a point now where I know we're going to want certain fees for certain players, but if we want these guys off the books, then we almost within reason going to have to pretty much accept what people give us, unless it's a completely disrespectful offer. And we're just going to have to take it on the chin and just take a hit on these players and accept, you know what, we want these guys off the books. We want the wages freed up. We're not going to get as much money as we want for them, but we need them gone. Do you think we're going to have to start taking hits on players just to move them out the door? So I don't think we're going to get realistically the fees that we want for these guys.
Yeah, and I don't think it's the transfer fee that's the problem. It's more the wage bill, getting those players off the books so you can have that money available, because these players are on astronomical wages. There's no question about that. Yeah, it's a really tricky situation. I mean, obviously the owners will want to make a stance. We've said it before about they want to make some sort of a statement signing, but I think we are going to have to take. It's going to have to be a bit of a Chelsea bargains where we're just going to have to take what we're given, and if we want them off the books, as you said, we're going to have to just accept that we're not going to get the money that we initially invested in them, just because of the performance levels just haven't been to standard, and it's going to show in the value of the player.
Yeah, no, 100%, mate. Right, mate. Let's get into outgoings then. One major outgoing that's going to obviously be doing the rounds for. It's probably going to go deep into the window, but hopefully not. We need to get this sorted ASAP. That's of Romelu Lukaku, joined last summer for £97.5 million, club record signing. We won't bore you with all the ins and outs. We all know how it went, what happened. It's not worked out. He wants to return to Inter, and it looks like it's getting a little bit closer. But obviously the structure of this deal is kind of what the problem is potentially going to be at the moment. Todd Boehly, Chelsea and Tuchel feel they can't continue with Lukaku. Chelsea are going to start discussing internally on many things, including Jorginho and Kante. Signing players is a priority for Chelsea. They also go. Fabrizio Romano also goes on to report that Chelsea wants to get internal solutions resolved as soon as possible, and they are working on it in quotation marks. They want to clarify many things, including young players like Brozier and Gallagher. They also want Mount's contract sorted by the end of this year. And it says that Chelsea, it goes on to finish that Chelsea are working behind the scenes. George, on Lukaku, Todd Boehly, new owner, this is very much a different approach, because you would feel that under Roman, that Tuchel would be made to make Lukaku work, whereas Boehly seems to be coming in. He's not invested in the player himself, but he seems to be siding with the manager. We've seen many a time over the year that when it comes to a record signing, particularly in a centre-forward position, if it's not working, it's often the manager that pays for the job. We've seen it with the likes of Shevchenko and Mourinho, as an example. This seems to be a change of tack, doesn't it, mate? In terms of an owner siding with the manager and is happy to move on a club record signing from only a year ago.
Yeah, it's a good start. I mean, if that's what's been documented is true, then it's nice that an owner's working with the manager, because you alluded to there a perfect example where I think that the downfall of Mourinho is where Ballack and Shevchenko, his signings, was he forced to play them? Certainly, there seems to be an element of that. And we saw in the in the Abramovich tenure, that he did always like that statement signing, particularly as a so-called number 9. Did it with countless players, Torres, Lukaku, and the like. So, it's nice to see that there's some sort of a relationship already building where they're working, side by side. And yeah, obviously the Lukaku thing hasn't worked, and I think we need to draw a line under it and start again. And he's certainly one. You're talking about wages. I mean, he'll be on, again, astronomical wages.
He's top earner at the club. I think it's 325k a week.
I mean, that's ludicrous. I don't think any player should be on that sort of money. Certainly a player that can't put the ball in the net. So for me, yes, this one is going to linger on, I feel, until, pretty much. I would still be convinced that it would still be being tied up towards the start of the season, because of the details that are involved, but hopefully the sooner the better for that one, for all parties concerned.
Yeah, for sure. I'm just going to bring it up now, mate. The latest on the Lukaku deal. Ben Jacobs has actually been on the channel in the past. Great journalist. Talks. He tweeted this out yesterday. I believe Chelsea actually did reject a bid from Inter. I think it was of €5 million for a loan, which is disrespectful as fuck, really. Talks continuing between Chelsea and Inter. A traditional loan is now looking less likely than a swap deal. Both options have been explored. Chelsea want a defender. Skriniar, Bastoni, and Dumfries have all been discussed. Inter sources familiar with the talk say they don't want to lose Bastoni, whose agent has also said he's definitely staying. I mean, if the money's right, he's not staying. No doubt Bastoni is happy at Inter, but agent quotes should be taken with a pinch of salt. Skriniar being chased by PSG. Inter are open to letting him go. There is an acceptance they can't get Lukaku without either paying a significantly higher loan fee or trading someone. My understanding remains there is no chance of Chelsea getting Lautaro Martinez. Still, also some discussion with Chelsea as to whether Lukaku should simply be loaned in the short term, given he's under contract until 2026. Bowley's spoken to Tuchel to determine whether the relationship between manager and player is repairable. But there's loads of this, Jesus. In a more traditional loan deal, Chelsea would want over double the 5 million Inter have offered, so 12 to 15 million euros likely loan fee. Talks complicated by many moving parts, type of deal, loan or swap, Bowley's input, player-manager dynamic. But most of all, Chelsea maintained from the very start Lukaku will only be allowed to leave if the deal makes financial sense. He won't be loaned/sold out of sentiment. Chelsea and Inter are confident, however, of agreeing a deal in the coming week, but talks not simple. A lot to get through there, George. What do you reckon, mate? This obviously Lukaku wants to go. Are you fully in the court that we need to? It's got to be right for the club. We shouldn't just let him go out of sentiment. It's got to be a financial deal that works for Chelsea.
Yeah, but unfortunately, I think Chelsea are in a bit of a Inter have the monopoly here because Chelsea are obviously publicly desperate to sell him. It's clear he hasn't worked, and we're never going to reach the fee that we paid for him initially. So. Inter have got the upper hand where they don't need to pay over the odds for him. I think the only thing that's slightly paid into our favour now is that AC Milan winning Serie A. Their missing piece of the puzzle is getting Lukaku back, potentially with those goals. So, Lukaku wants to go to Inter. There's no doubt about that. Chelsea don't want him anymore. That's clear. But it isn't as easy as that because I don't think Inter want to overpay. For us personally, I think the best option is a swap. I wouldn't like. I don't think there's a potential that you could send him out on loan.
But at 29 years of age, we really want to be sending someone on a 1-year loan deal.
And I think what is really interesting in those comments is the relationship with the manager. I think it's fairly obvious that it's not repairable. I think once you lose faith in a player, even if he went to Serie A back on a loan and managed to score loads of goals, would he ever come back to Chelsea? Highly doubtful. So I think whatever happens with this, I'm hoping as a fan that it's a permanent one.
Yeah, I mean, do you think that 12 to 15 million euros for a season's loan, that's quite steep, isn't it? You don't often hear of loan. Yeah. I know, obviously, he's a big player, of course, but I mean, if we want to do business, I mean, we know Inter have got financial problems. 12 to 15 million, that seems a bit steep. I know we were initially asking for 20 and we were trying to go for 12 to 15. Their initial offer was 5 million. I mean, do you think we can actually get 12 to 15?
Again, I think doubtful. I think Chelsea, again, are going to have to bargain a little bit with Inter here and meet in the middle. I mean, 5 is five's the other way. It's a bit insulting, really. I mean, he's still got, we're talking about a £100 million player here. Okay, he's not worth that now, that's for sure. But well, this is why it's such a struggle, isn't it? This is why this hasn't been sorted, and it's not going to be sorted for some time, I feel, because who's putting the worth on Lukaku, and ultimately, who does it benefit?
I mean, I think if we can do a swap deal, mate, I reckon that's the best of both worlds. We get rid of Lukaku, who we don't want at the club anymore. He doesn't want to be there. Inter get someone they want, and in return, we can get a defender that we desperately need. I mean, out of the names, I know Bastoni is obviously a very good defender, but the one that I'm most interested in, which I think would be very beneficial, is Denzel Dumfries. Right wing back, Dutch international. I think he joined Inter last summer. Had a good season. He can operate on both flanks. Thomas Tuchel likes him. That would make sense, wouldn't it? We need wing back cover. Left and right side he can play. If we could do that, George, it makes sense, doesn't it? I mean, for me, out of the three listed out of Skriniar, I think Skriniar will most likely go to PSG potentially. Bastoni will be tough to get out. Dumfries, I think if we could swap Lukaku for Dumfries, I'll be bang up for that. But I do think that a swap deal is the best outcome. Would you agree on that?
Yeah, I agree with that. And again, out of three names, I mean, I would prefer Skriniar, but yeah, I do think Dumfries very good international player. Like you said, can work on both flanks, which is what we need at the moment, particularly with aging fullbacks. So, I mean, as a fan, that's perfect for us. But again, I don't think Chelsea have the ball in their court for this one.
I mean, I don't know. You think in theory Chelsea would be happy to do that though, because we need to sign wing back cover. We could be saving ourselves, 25, 30 million pounds to come, to bring in a fullback. If we could just do a swap deal, I think it would make sense. Obviously, I know a swap deal is just a straight trade. It's pretty hard. You don't see it that often in football, but I mean, this is going to be tough to get sorted out. There's going to be a lot of negotiation. I think next week could be a big week in it. But I mean, out of the three, Dumfries for you, I think makes the most sense, really. I mean, I can understand Skriniar at centre half, but yeah, I think Dumfries would probably make the most sense in my opinion. Let me just bring a couple of things up into the chat. I don't think Dumfries would be happy as just cover or backup. If Dumfries is to come, he prefer first team football. Yeah, no, of course. But having said that, Chelsea play a lot of games. We're going to go deep into many competitions. We played over 60 games last season. There's now 5 subs this coming season. Chilwell's not going to be fit or back to his best till at least after the World Cup. If Dumfries comes in, he would play a lot of football, even if Chilwell was fit. With the amount of games we play, 5 subs, cup competitions, injuries, suspensions, this guy will play a lot of football. So I don't think that's a particular issue. In my opinion. But George, obviously Lukaku, hopefully we can move him out. I mean, just lastly on this, mate, I mean, what can Chelsea do in the future to learn from disaster transfers like this one? I mean, we've seen it so many times before. How vital is it that going forwards under Bodie, there's going to be transfers that don't work out, but how important is it that we don't have another one like this? I can't remember a transfer being this much money that's kind of gone so spectacularly wrong in one season.
No, I can't either. It's difficult. Look, from my perspective, I never rated Lukaku, and I know that a lot of people were on the bandwagon saying he's the missing piece to the puzzle, and we were going to go on to win the league. I thought we would challenge, and everyone watched early doors and thought, look, he was banging in the goals, and we thought, right, this is it now. For me, unfortunately, it's just the way the market is. I'm not going to say that it was a mistake from Chelsea, because that's the price you pay. City are doing the same. They've got no guarantee that Erling Haaland is going to be a success. Unfortunately, at Chelsea, it just seems to be a recurring issue where we've had a lot of players. I think the issue is the age, really, that we've gone for these players. You look at Torres, back end of his career, Shevchenko the same, Lukaku the same. Can we get someone a little bit younger, a little bit fresher? And we both agree that maybe we should go for someone a bit of an underdog who's Premier League proven, that perhaps goes under the radar, but has got something to prove. I think the players that have come in, big names, but I don't know, they've kind of done it all. So have they got that motivation to really kick on at their ages? I don't know. I think that's the big question. But certainly, I think Chelsea are not going to be going in for another £100 million striker anytime soon. That's for sure.
I mean, according to Adam Newson at Football London, chief Chelsea correspondent, very reliable, he's saying that Lukaku expects to rejoin Inter before pre-season gets underway at the start of July. So who knows on that front? And also the issue at the moment, holding things up, David Ornstein reporting in The Athletic that the hold-up in negotiations is that Chelsea want players in return as well, as we've just discussed. So, I mean, it's definitely going to be interesting for sure. But again, it's going to be one that certainly rumbles on. That's certainly the case. George, whilst we're on attackers then, mate, Gabriel Jesus, we discussed him last week. It's gone a little bit quiet this week. Reports doing the rounds that it appears that he may prefer to join Arsenal over Chelsea. I don't know how true that is. It's believed that Arsenal kind of readying a bid of £50 million for him. 25 years of age, we've discussed him before, versatile. I think he'd be a great fit for Chelsea. But George, are you surprised that he might potentially choose Arsenal instead? I mean, no Champions League football, but he would have more guaranteed first-team football at Arsenal.
Well, there's the point. There's one point. I mean, he's going to be their leading player wherever he plays across that front line. Relationship with Arteta, perhaps when he was at Manchester City, maybe it's got something to do with it. I don't know. And again, I think at Chelsea, like you said, is he guaranteed first-team football if it doesn't go well from the off? I think that's...
Well, if Lukaku moves, he'll get a lot of minutes, just for games as well. I mean...
It is a strange one because I think, if your ambitions are to win things, you would be going to Chelsea over Arsenal. But I don't know, maybe manager relationship, maybe the fact that Arsenal is still a project that have potential. With a lot of the youngsters that are coming through, Martinelli, Smith Rowe, and Nketiah. They've got some good players there to work with. Yeah, it has gone quiet. From all the reports that I've read on Twitter, it's edging towards Arsenal now. I haven't seen much from Chelsea, but
I haven't seen hardly anything now on Jesus for Chelsea, apart from the fact we've been offered him. But again, George, how you wonder, don't you? Obviously agents kind of offer players about. Chelsea said to be interested in Jesus. If we're really that interested, I mean, obviously this could be a bit naive. We don't know the kind of the ins and outs of how much goes into a transfer deal. But if we're interested and we potentially want him, why have we not put a bid in? Why has no bid gone in? This is what I don't understand. We've got a list of players we're interested in. We're kind of looking at. Why have no bids gone in? What are we waiting for?
Yeah, I don't understand this. And you look at the City model; they do tend to get on with business very, very quickly with their owners. They come up with a list and they go for it, and they get to their meeting sharpish. They put bids in. Yes, obviously they've probably got more finance than Chelsea at the moment, but I don't. I know the complexities of transfers are difficult, but there's no harm in just, submitting your interest with a bid, is there? What's the worst that's going to happen is that it just gets rejected and you're back to square one. I don't see. I don't know unless we're completely off it, and this is just media circulation. Actually, Chelsea have not even got him on this list, and therefore that's why we haven't been interested. I don't know, because you question whether Jesus is a good enough level to take us to the next level. He might be a good player, but is he good enough to close the gap? Debatable.
It is debatable. What's not debatable, according to Sky Sports and other sources, is that Chelsea's quote-unquote real target is Manchester City forward Raheem Sterling rather than Gabriel Jesus. It's also saying that Chelsea are kind of waiting to hear on a price from Manchester City. Now, George, why are we waiting to hear a price? Why are we not just slap 50 million on the table and see what they say? If they say no, then we've got a starting point. City aren't going to be like, we want X amount for him, and then we bid. Why do we not just bid and just see what happens? This is what I don't get. If the real target or the number one attacking target is Raheem Sterling, put a fucking bid in. What are we waiting for? Are we waiting for him to put a transfer request in? Are we waiting for him to say publicly that he wants to come and join us? Are we waiting for Pep to say that he's for sale? What are we doing?
Well, it's a bit of game of chess, isn't it? Who's going to make the first move? Because if we go in there with an initial bid and it's over what City think, they might, look at their lips and think, right, he's got a year left on his contract. And Chelsea have gone in with an unbelievable bid. We'll accept it. You've also got the flip side where, if City go first and they, value him too low or too high, then Chelsea obviously have got a steal. So I can get why it's a bit standoffish at the moment and no one wants to put an initial bid in. And again, this one's going to run its course. I mean, you talk about next levels. I personally think Sterling would he is one that you would add and would only make us better, just because of the way he plays, his pace, stretching that pitch, his ability to influence games with goals. I think personally that should be Chelsea's number one target, and it should be done.
Are you surprised, mate, that someone, no disrespect to Sterling, but like it's not a sort of sign you'd associate with Chelsea in years gone by? Are you surprised that Sterling is kind of one of the real top targets of Chelsea this summer? Because it's kind of taken me a little bit by surprise. Not that he's like not a good player, because he is, but it doesn't really strike me as much of a Chelsea signing, if that makes sense.
Um, yeah, I see where you're coming from. Um, but again, it depends. This is where I think Chelsea may change tact in terms of their approach the next season with the lineup. I don't. I think we just lacked someone with finishing ability and goals. And I looked at, I was training through Sky Sports today on the telly, and he's right up there with the amount of goals he's got in the Premier
Yeah,
League since 2016-ish. Liverpool, City. He's right up there with like Jamie Vardy, Harry Kane, and everyone else. So,
but do
um,
you do you think though, mate? Does he take us to the next level though? Do you know
I
what I
think so.
mean? You
I think
think you
so.
think you think he elevates us to the next level? Do you think he's that much better than what we've already got?
Uh,
Like, is he a
yeah.
different? Like, do you know what I mean? Though I'm like, I'm not saying. Look, I think he's obviously he's different to Hakim Ziyech. He's different to kind of these players because he's more of an out and out wide player that contributes goals. But I look at it and it's an interesting one because his record's phenomenal and he's been great at Manchester City. Obviously, the last couple of years he's slightly declined in terms of his output and his numbers and the amount of minutes that he plays. But I don't know what it is. There's just something that I can't quite fully get behind this one. I think for me, if it was Sterling and one more, then I'll be happy with it. If it was Sterling and Dembele, Sterling and Kunku, or Sterling and whatever, I'd be more for it. For me, where my issue comes is if Sterling's the only attacker that comes in. Do you get what I mean? I think for me,
Yeah.
he'd need to be like a complementary on top of someone else as well. If Sterling's going to come in, I'd rather he comes in with another attacker rather than Sterling being the only one that comes in, if you get what I'm saying.
And this was our point last week, wasn't it? That if we were given the choice, that we both agreed that Jesus would possibly fit better because he's able to play the number 9 role and he's more versatile in that front three. I know Sterling's played the false 9 before, but then it comes down to what's more important in Chelsea's window rather than who's the better player. I don't think there's much debate who's the better player there. Is Sterling over Jesus, but what fits the mold, and that's where Chelsea perhaps have gone wrong in years gone by, where we've gone for that. Again, this would be a bit of a statement signing. Sterling is a big name,
Yeah.
But again, would he fit? I mean, I think he would, but a lot of Chelsea fans would probably agree that maybe Jesus is the better fit, even though he's more underrated. So it's a really interesting one to see how it runs. But for me, I think when talking about closing the gap, I think he's better than what we've got already in those areas and can only make us stronger. I don't think Jesus perhaps does that. But again, hindsight, isn't it? Both of them could turn up, be awful.
Yeah, well, it's pretty standard, but I'm kind of half expecting it.
Yeah, exactly.
It just seems to be a bit of a curse. But George, do you think it's very much a case of like if we stick with the 3-4-3 and we bring Sterling in, do you think he can adapt to that kind of, because the 3-4-3, it's not proper wingers, it's more like inside tens. For me, I always look at Sterling as someone that plays more as an out and out wide man. Do you think that potentially that could be looking at maybe switching more to a 4-3-3 if Sterling was to come in? Or do you think he can equally adapt to kind of playing as a narrow 10, as it were?
I can't see him as a 10. He's
no,
interesting.
I don't mean as a number 10, but do you know what I mean? We play like inside 10s, don't we? When we play our 3-4-3, they're not proper out and out wingers.
No, not for me, because I don't think his overall game is good enough to suit that role. I think he's more of a, like you said, he's right on the touchline, uses his pace. The classic cut inside, old school winger. But he has got that tendency to get in that 6-yard box and finish off a lot of scrappy chances. He does that a lot. But this is why I think if Chelsea are going to go for Sterling, there's going to be a change in formation. I would be quite happy with a 4-3-3 swap.
Yeah.
I would. Him on the left, on the right perhaps, and then, Havertz in the middle, or, whoever we bring in, I would like to see. But again, for me personally, mate, I think this is more noise. I still heavily think that he'll see out his year.
Still think he'll stay?
Yeah, because I just don't. I think City will just put. He's on his last year, so this is why it's interesting who's going to make the first move, because it'll be interesting to see how much they value him at, because they can't value him too high because he's only got a year left. But if I was Pep, there's no harm in keeping him and letting him see out his another year, because he still does play him a lot. I know Grealish will probably take over with the amount of appearances and it will swap next season, but he's still very useful for Manchester City.
Yeah, no, he is. I mean, it'd be interesting to see, but I think for sure though, mate, City would rather, in my opinion, cash in now and get money back for him. I know money's not really a problem for them, but I think if there's an opportunity for them to get 50, 60 million pounds, I think they'd rather take that than potentially risk losing him for nothing.
Potentially, but then who else have they got in that?
Well, they've got obviously they've got the likes of Mahrez, they've got Foden, Grealish, Alvarez is coming in, Haaland's in. But you say though, it's a fair point though. If Jesus and Sterling go, City will probably need to bring in one more in that wide area.
Yeah, exactly. So again, you're right. Maybe they want to cash in, but if I was Pep Guardiola, I'd probably be saying, if he's happy to stay and see out his year, there's no harm having Sterling in your squad again. He still contributed last season. But he'll have to accept that he'll probably be on the fringes, and Grealish will take a more predominant role there next season. So it's really down to Sterling, because he's got the upper hand because he's got a year left on his contract. So if he wants to, put in a transfer request, he's probably got the option to go. But I don't know, mate.
Just one last thing on him, mate. Do you think City would have it? Do you think City would have any problems selling to Chelsea in terms of a direct rival? I know we're quite a way off the pace last season, but we're still kind of a challenger to City. Do you think they'd have any issues with that?
Yes. I mean, not ideally. They don't want to make anyone within their same league stronger, but unfortunately, those types of players like Sterling are only going to go to, if they want to stay in the Premier League, they've only got a certain amount of choices.
Yeah, well, is that two or three clubs, isn't it? You look at he's not going to go back to Liverpool. And I mean, no, not I don't think so now. But like you look at, he won't go to Man United.
No,
Arsenal have been linked with Sterling in the past. It's really Arsenal or Chelsea. If you're, they've got Bernardo.
I don't think Arsenal could afford his wages.
City have got Bernardo Silva as well. I forgot about that.
Yeah.
But
they would obviously prefer to sell abroad, obviously.
Oh, for sure, mate. George, another interesting one. Chelsea have a genuine interest in Richarlison at Everton. Don't be surprised if we make a move for him this summer. Tuchel really admires Richarlison's fighting mentality and his power. Now, George, Richarlison's one of those interesting ones. He always gives me Diego Costa vibes, not in terms of ability, but in terms of elite level shithousery. He's one of those that when he's on your team, you probably absolutely love him, but when he's against you, you cannot stand him. I mean, I was up at Goodison last season. He was playing. Obviously, he fucking scored, but he's one of those that he's time wasting. He's diving on the floor. He's your worst nightmare as an opposition fan, as an opposition player. But when he's on your team, he's one of those that he has got ability. I mean, I don't think this is necessarily going to happen. But I mean, what do you make of the reported interest in Richarlison? Do you think he's maybe a kind of player that could work at Chelsea? But again, Everton would want similar money, 50, 60 million pounds.
Yeah, mate.
Do you like Richarlison?
Yeah, I like him, and I think it's the right tact for Chelsea to go on this summer. I think we need to go Premier League proven players. He's definitely proven. He's got something about him. The best strikers that have done well in the past are the ones that have been under the radar. Didier Drogba, people said he was too old. He's past it when he started being a professional player. And Nicolas Anelka, came in for a big fee, but potentially wasn't like a star signing. Then you have players like Diego Costa, Olivier Giroud. Look how well Giroud did at Chelsea. People thought that was a bit of an odd one at the time.
Well, even players like Malouda as not obviously in the chat now saying could be a bit like Malouda. Obviously not quite, not like quite the same player, but the same kind of thing. I mean, I don't know. There's something about this kind of it does sort of appeal to me a little bit. I mean,
I'm not opposed to it. It's just like you said, the fee is the big one, isn't it?
Everton are going to want a lot of money from him. He's basically their best player, essentially.
Yeah.
So, I mean, do you think this could happen? Do you think we might do a bid for him? I mean, obviously, what do you reckon, mate? I mean, I wouldn't be against it, but like in reality, do you think this is like the sort of player that Chelsea would bid for? I mean, if Tuchel's a fan of him and the board are backing Tuchel and he wants him, then we need to go for it.
I think he would honestly be on my list, mate. I'm not saying that, Jesus, Richarlison, Sterling, all players that I think Chelsea should be looking at and certainly, peppering around with bids and seeing which one sticks. I like the idea of going down the Premier League route. That's personal opinion to me. And if you're going that narrow, there aren't a lot of options, and you have to go for players. I think the good one about Richarlison is perhaps that we've got the power play, because if he wants to join a better club, City would be a bit of a sideways move for Sterling. Whereas, I think Richarlison is definitely a step up, and I think he would relish playing in a Chelsea shirt and fighting on all honours. Like, he's too good for Everton. There's no doubt about that.
I mean, do you think potentially, mate, Lampard obviously be trying to use some Chelsea connections of his to get some sort of fringe players on loan? I mean, if this move to materialise, do you think we could potentially see something along the lines of maybe we offer a bit of money for Richarlison plus like Billy Gilmore on loan, or maybe even Conor Gallagher on loan? Do you think that something could come down along those lines potentially, so that Everton are getting a bit of something in return? I mean, we've got kind of pieces to play with as well in this deal if it were to materialise.
Yeah, perhaps. And I think you could even argue that some of the players in the forward line, bit of an outstretch, but someone like a Timo Werner or...
I'll be happy to ship him on, yeah.
I mean, Frank Lampard bought him, so you obviously have faith in the start. I think what's important is that Frank Lampard will not want to sell Richarlison at any cost, because he knows that without him, they would have almost certainly been gone down. And you don't want to make yourselves weaker by selling your best player. It might get to the point where it's out of his control, but for a player like Richarlison, when you're at your very peak performance level, you don't get very many opportunities, so he needs to think about personally if he wants to. If a bid comes in, I think if a bid came in, he would be interested.
He'd be keen to leave 100%. I mean, George, just on outgoings now at Chelsea. I mean, obviously Dembele incomings last little bit. Still not really any update on Dembele. Contract officially expires at the end of the month. We might get some news in the next week or so, but it seems to have gone a bit quiet on that. Hopefully there could be some developments, but not really much to update on there. Christopher Nkunku as well. Leipzig want £85 million for him. I think that's just a massive no-no. Even as much as we admire him, I can't see that happening. But in terms of outgoings, George, obviously no suitors as of yet, it appears, for Timo Werner. So, I mean, as it stands, George, I've got to be honest, I think Werner could end up staying. I mean, I know there's a long way to go in the window still, but I just don't see, A, there being that many suitors, and B, Chelsea getting an offer they deem acceptable. Do you think it's potentially, there's a chance that despite everything, I'm sort of more edging towards that Timo could actually still be here next season?
And for me, I like it. I like that he's staying. But Tuchel likes him. I don't
know how much he likes him, mate. He's hog.
I think sometimes it's not a case of just saying, right, he hasn't had a good season or a couple of good seasons, let's get him off. There's no harm in keeping a player that's of a good age who could perhaps, you never know. You do never know. He could have a season revelation. Unlikely, but you don't always have to ship everyone out who's playing shit. Like, it's just...
No, of course not.
It's not going to happen. It's not going to happen. So, Tuchel does still fancy him in certain games where, we need to press. And, one thing he has got that a lot of players, he's got over other players is pace. If he can just turn his finish into finishing ability, we've seen it. We have seen it. Are you
surprised how much of a different player he looks for Germany? I don't know if you saw any of his highlights for Germany over those 4 Nations League games. Look at him play for Germany. You just think, why does he never do that in a Chelsea shirt?
Well, international football's a lot slower, isn't it? It's not.
Yeah, but he seems to be like a completely different player.
But again, it's confidence, isn't it? He probably puts on that Chelsea shirt now and thinks, God, I've had so many shit games in this shirt. Like, I can't. I just, he probably just thinks about all those chances that he's missed. Whereas, Germany, one of the biggest sides in international history, a team that will always tend to dominate possession, game's a lot slower. Tactics are different. It's not as physical. I think those things just suit him. But I still think there's a good player there. I think if he just sorts out his finishing, he could definitely improve his numbers.
Yeah, no, for sure. I think, again, it would depend on who comes in. If a couple come in, then I think Chelsea would definitely look to get him out. But in terms of outgoings as well, though, George, Liam Toomey reporting from The Athletic that Hakim Ziyech has not enjoyed a productive relationship with Thomas Tuchel and has not seen the cleanest fit in Chelsea's system. A transfer this summer could work for all parties. Out of the three that are most likely to leave, George, in terms of Werner, Ziyech, Pulisic, I don't think Pulisic will leave.
No.
Werner or Ziyech, I've got to be honest now, mate. I think Ziyech is more likely to leave than Timo Werner this summer. I mean, I think there's a player in there in Ziyech, and if we were to switch to a 4-3-3, I'd be all up for keeping Ziyech. But it doesn't seem to have worked out. He's touching on 30. I think he's 28, 29. Maybe it's just time to cut our ties. Do you think, as things stand, he's the most likely attacker to be shipped out?
Yeah, for me. And if it was my decision, he would be the one to go. For those reasons that I think he's not before. I don't know. We have seen some great performances from him. Unfortunately, he got that injury, didn't he, in pre-season when he was playing so well. And I agree. I think he's got incredible talent if he's got the freedom to do it. But I just don't think the Premier League suits him. I honestly don't. I just think it's too quick, too physical. He's so one-sided. It's just obvious where he's going to go every time.
Yeah.
I don't know. And I think for those reasons, I think he's number one on the list in those forward lines to go. So, yeah, it's unfortunate.
Mate, I would agree on that. Another player also potentially that could be moved on, more likely on loan if he is to leave, Callum Hudson-Odoi. Undoubted talent. We haven't really seen bits of it under Thomas Tuchel. Really struggled with the reoccurrence of an Achilles problem towards the back end of last season. We hardly saw him in the last few months of the season. Again, he's still very young. George, this is a really important season coming up for Callum. Do you think it could be better served for him to head out on loan? I mean, potential reports doing the rounds I've seen that Brighton could be a possible loan destination for him. Do you think at this stage, George, that it could be best for Callum to go on loan?
I think so. I think Callum needs to go on loan, get some first team football under his belt. There's no doubt there's the talent in there. We saw it. He needs football. And I think the ideal scenario would be to keep him in the Premier League, get him some minutes, just like Gilmour did for Norwich.
Well, hopefully it goes a bit better than that.
Yeah, well, yeah, but I'm set. Get on the pitch. Really, I mean, he had that window, didn't he? Where he was starting regularly and he just missed.
He did really well. He played 8 or 9 games in a row. Yeah, he did well.
But then he tailed off when he had so many good chances and missed them. We felt, oh God, if he takes those, it's a different ball game, and he could have perhaps kept that for the rest of the season, that starting place. But it just tailed off, and I just think, again, where it's just too high a pressure at the moment at Chelsea, where you're expecting immediate results. He needs to develop his game slightly. So, but I don't want to lose him. I feel like it would be a bit of a Tomori kind of situation with him.
Yeah, I think it'd be. I do agree. A loan would be best. I just don't think he's going to get enough minutes to justify what he needs at this stage in his career. But having said that, you just don't know. That's the problem. You just don't know. But I mean, let's move on to midfield now, mate. Again, Declan Rice is a primary target. Tuchel loves him. The Bowley said they want to make at least one statement signing. Declan Rice would be a statement signing. We've seen the likes of Basuma go to Tottenham, Sangare at PSV again linked with, but he could go elsewhere. It's clear that Tuchel wants Rice. George, Tuchel wants Rice. We need to try and back it. We need to get Rice if we can. Is that something you expect the club to press on with this summer? Ultimately, whether it happens or not is up for debate. West Ham are going to be tough to negotiate with, but if Tuchel wants Rice, we've got to go and do everything that we can, haven't we?
Mate, he is the number one target for Chelsea, I feel. 100%. We have to go for this. If we end this window and we haven't pursued Declan Rice, I'll be fuming.
Yeah.
I just think, we've got to compete against the rival clubs. He's definitely a player that will take us to the next level. He's got every box is ticked. He's young. We need that position filled. He'd be a starter. He's got a good relationship with, he's Bezzies with fucking Mason Mount, who we all know. That history was.
He's good mates with JT.
JT came up in the youth academy, let go from, I think, when Neil Bath was in charge of the youth setup there. Just ticks every single box. And yes, it's going to be a hard fee. And yes, West Ham notoriously are very difficult to deal with. They'll just set a ridiculous fee that will kind of scare a lot of teams off, but it shouldn't for Chelsea. If there's speculations right that we've got about 200 million, I'd be more than happy to blow half of that and get Declan Rice, in all honesty.
Yeah. No, mate, I would agree. I mean, Nazar Kinsella saying he's an obviously reliable journalist on Goal on Chelsea. Obviously, Rice is a Chelsea fan. His family supports Chelsea, came from the academy. We know he would welcome a move to Chelsea, but West Ham are the problem. I think they would cash in at the right price this summer, but they could wait one more season. Obviously, West Ham are in no hurry to cash in. Rice has got a good few years left on his contract. But George, as you say, it's clear that Tuchel wants Rice. He's the number one target. As we said earlier, why has no bid gone in? Why have not just banged down 75 million pounds on the table just to get things moving along? What are we waiting for again?
Yeah, I don't know what's going on. And I'd be even more angry if he then was available and he actually did move, but it wasn't to Chelsea. If he's going to move, it's got to be in a Chelsea shirt. We cannot allow him to go to somewhere like Manchester United and be fooled by the project that's going on there. Can't see it, potentially Manchester City, I can't see it. And those are really the only options. Chelsea just fits every single box. It fits for both for him. I think the only thing that obviously is difficult, like you said, is he's captain. Noble's retired. He'll take that complete role now. West Ham actually had a really good season, so again, they're going to build around him.
Conference League next year, though.
Yeah, but they I mean, it's unfortunate they didn't obviously do better in the European competition that they were in, but I still think that it's similar to the situation at, what was I saying? I can't remember now. Well, whatever. They're going to build. They're going to build around him, aren't they? They're his. It's like Richarlison at Everton. Sorry. They're not going to want to sell their best player, certainly to a rival, and make West Ham worse, which is inevitably what will happen. But mate, honestly, I'll be fuming if we don't make a bid, and I'll be absolutely devastated if he is available, goes, but Chelsea don't get him.
I would be pissed if we don't get him, to be honest. He's a number one target. It's so obvious we want him. It's inexcusable to not do absolutely everything to get this deal over the line. I mean, how
much would you? Oh, I was just about to ask you the same.
Mate,
what?
I'd go 100.
Fuck it, yeah. To be fair, I said.
I mean, to be fair, yeah, mate. 100, mate.
We would be in charge of the.
No, mate. I think 100's fair. Look at his age, mate. He not only fixes Chelsea issues in the short term, he fixes long-term problems as well. We signed Rice. That's our holding midfield player for the next 10 years. Like it's an investment. It's an investment. I'd say, look, it's not going to cost 100 million. I don't think. I think this deal could be done for 85, 90 million pounds. I think around that mark. I don't think it would go to 100. That's for sure. In terms of Basuma, RD in the chat saying Basuma for 25 mil. Yeah, the reason he was 25 mil is because he's got 1 year left on his contract at Brighton. That's why he was available for so cheap. I would have liked to have seen him at Chelsea as well, but yeah, just wasn't to be. George, not really linked with many other incomings in midfield at the moment. In terms of, I just want brief thoughts, mate, on Conor Gallagher. I had a great start to the season at Crystal Palace. Kind of tailed off a bit second half of the season. Wasn't anywhere near as productive. Tuchel's going to assess him in pre-season. Do you think he's got a role to play next year? Again, 20 years of age. He's young. He's an England international now. For me, though, it doesn't suit a two-man midfield. It doesn't suit a pivot for me. I think he needs to play as a number 8 in a 3, whether that's alongside Mount, whether that's alongside Kovacic, with primarily a Declan Rice or a Jorginho or whatever behind him. Do you think Gallagher's future could very much depend on what system we play next season.
Yeah, and again, I think this is where it's difficult for Chelsea in the transfer window because, at the top of the show, we were saying we're too congested in areas, and we are. So you can't really go for Declan Rice just yet if we've got players like Kante, Jorginho, Kovacic all playing in similar roles. Conor Gallagher, Billy Gilmour to come back, Loftus-Cheek in there. Like, it's so congested. I don't know. I've listened to a lot. I listen to TalkSport pretty much every day, and they had this discussion a couple of weeks ago. And I think Jack Wilshere made a really good point that he's a very talented footballer, but he's again, this is probably one like the Hudson-Odoi situation where you'd love to see him just play somewhere else, but not Chelsea. I can't see Tuchel giving him the faith to play starting number 8, like as a number 8. I just can't see him in the Chelsea starting 11. As much as I'd love to see it.
But do you think though, with 5 subs as well, like there's actually more chance of him getting? There'll be more chance of him getting more minutes. There's room for more rotation with 5 subs compared to the 3. Now that we're going to have the 5, that could probably work in his favour. But yeah, I think it'll be interesting. It really will. But I think he definitely deserves a chance. I'd love to see him play as a number 8 at Chelsea, but that's going to very much depend on if we sign a holding midfield player. Gilmour, mate, I totally agree with this. I got battered on Twitter the other day for saying that Gilmour wasn't good enough for Chelsea. I got battered, mate. I don't look. He's obviously got ability and he's talented. I just don't.
Well, someone slated you for saying that, did they?
Yeah, mate. I got battered on Twitter for saying that Gilmour wasn't good enough for Chelsea.
I do love Billy Gilmour. I've got to be honest.
I just don't think he's good enough, mate. I think he's too slight in stature.
Did you not see him play against Liverpool when he played in that league?
Yeah, but mate, it's a couple of games, isn't it? Like, let's be honest, mate. Would you be happy Billy Gilmour starting most weeks in Chelsea's midfield? And the answer is no. No, exactly, mate. Mate, your indecision says it all there. So you're not even believing your own hype.
No, but he has potential. He hasn't done anything wrong in a Chelsea shirt for me. I think he's not done anything wrong,
but I just don't think he's quite good enough. There's no shame in not being good enough. Like he could go and forge a career for himself very successfully somewhere else. But I just think at the top level, I just don't think he's quite good enough.
Don't know.
Well, I mean, I would be surprised if he was at Chelsea next season in the squad. I would expect him to go on loan. Whether that's another Premier League loan or whether that's a loan to Rangers, that's been touted in the past. But yeah, not much else to go on midfield, to be honest. Obviously, Jorginho and Kante contracts are out in the last 12 months heading into next season. So yeah, we'll have to wait and see what happens on those. We've given our thoughts on that. George, very briefly, mate, just want to round out with a bit of defensive updates. Jules Koundé successfully had his surgery. We should have got this deal done last summer. Why is this still not done? Like, I think now we're talking about the fee. Obviously, all players that play for La Liga side have got release clauses in the contract. It's just part of it. Chelsea don't want to meet the release clause. We're trying to negotiate the fee. It might be around £55 million, which is a bit less than the release clause. I mean, this is one that should have been done last summer. I was expecting this to just be done and dusted almost straight away within the first couple of days of the window opening. George, the longer this goes on, and reported interest from Barcelona, I don't know how accurate the reports emanating from Spain are. Could be the Spanish version of the Sun, in which case you can just chuck it in the bin. But I mean, are you concerned that this Koundé thing seems to be taking a bit longer than necessary? And if Barca's interest is genuine, there's a chance he could prefer to go there.
Yeah, and I agree, mate. I think it's one that I'm really surprised that we haven't sorted out, considering that if you think logically, that's the first area we need to get someone in, regardless of who it is, because of the fact that Rudiger and Christensen are both gone. So Lukaku's not gone anywhere yet. So I think that the priority is central defence. Whether Chelsea are waiting because we're really tying up what's going to be the best option for next season, because we need, again, a similar sort of player to Rice, who's going to be a project for the next, or an investment for the next 5-10 years. Difficult, but I think Koundé's one that I agree should have been done last year. There were done heavy links last year, but we just didn't get over the line.
He's had the surgery now as well. I mean, I'd be absolutely fuming if he ends up going to Barcelona or something instead, I'll be raging. It's inexcusable. Koundé needs to be done.
Yeah.
Hopefully it will be done next week, maybe. I mean, I don't know what we're waiting to sort out. I mean, personal terms are all agreed. Everything's agreed apart from the fee. I mean, what are we fucking about with a few mil for? I mean, seriously. We've had this before with Chelsea in the past. Like, we're going to spend like 50 odd million. Why are we pissing about over 1 or 2 mil? We're already spending 50. Why do we do this?
I'd love to get. I'd love to get an agent or whoever's in charge of transfers on the show and just explain what the fuck do people do in the window. That why does it take so when you're already spending £50 million? It was that classic one about Arsenal, wasn't it? And Suarez.
They did 40 million and a pound.
Like, what is going on? Like, what? There's some seriously sackable offences in football. These people that deal with transfers.
Yeah, mate, it's annoying, isn't it? But I mean, Koundé should be. I mean, we keep saying should be done, but it's not done yet. But hopefully that'll be over the line imminently. It's gone kind of quite quiet on Koulibaly. Nothing seems to have been doesn't seem to be a lot of noise from him in regards of a move. I'm going to have to wait for further updates on that. Matthias de Ligt, George, is another one that is a genuine, saying that it's a genuine target this summer, and there is more positivity now that a fee can be agreed, or at least a fee that Chelsea are more willing to pay. Long way off yet, though, but talks are ongoing. Very briefly, mate, is that one you'd like to see, de Ligt? 22 years of age.
Love him.
I know it's not been great from him at Juventus. Perhaps hasn't lived up to expectations entirely, but he's still very young. I think he's a fantastic centre-half. But again, this is going to be a tough one to do, isn't it, really? As the reports are saying, it could still be a long way off. And this is what this goes back to what we said at the top of the show, mate. Like, these deals are big for top players. They take a lot of time to get done. So we need to be sorting our shit out now and getting negotiations started, because there is a deal to be done. It does take weeks to conclude.
Yeah, it's going to be a really interesting window, because there's no standout player that you think, apart from Declan Rice, there's no one that you're like, that is an absolute shoe-in for Chelsea. Like,
yeah.
It's really up to, debate and opinions, and obviously the most important opinion of all is Thomas Tuchel's opinion.
Yeah.
We trust him 100%, but again, I just really hope that we don't come away from this window with, 1 or 2 players going out on loans, nothing in, and we're just slugging away at the beginning of pre-season with still nothing done. And that's my biggest worry.
Yeah, I mean, there's not really much else on other centre-halves. In the chat, Varner saying, Bremer of Torino he's been another potential target. Inter Milan have, in personal terms, agreed with him for a while. So it could be a possibility that if Inter Milan were to let a Skriniar go, or a Bastoni or whatever, Bremer from Torino would go in there. We have been linked with him. George, lastly, to round out, Chelsea have always considered Borna Sosa as a cheaper and more attainable player to sign than Marc Cucurella. Sosa was watched by Chelsea many times last season and impressed. I think this is a deal that we could be seen getting done. Cucurella, George, I know you're a fan of his. I'd love to see him at Chelsea as well. Very much looks like Manchester City are going to sign him. How annoying is that?
Fuck's sake. It's just fucking typical, isn't it? It's just like I hate them. They're just such shit houses. So if they're not greedy enough, don't want to sell Sterling to Chelsea, but having to get in Haaland and then Nick Cucurella as well. Really like him, mate. Watched a lot of him last year. Very much like a wing back, which is what we need.
Yeah, he's decent.
Wing back. And unlike Alonso, even though he's still defending is still a bit suspect, he's got the pace to get back in. So for me, he's definitely a target. But again, left back's a tricky one for us, because it's, I know Chilwell will take time to bed in, but you're always going to be looking as a player over your shoulder, think, well, Chilwell is the first choice left back. So, do I want to go to a club where I'm going to be on the bench when he gets back?
But as I said before, mate, it's going to be plenty of opportunity to play games at Chelsea with 5 subs now, and with all the competitions we're going to play, plus injuries, plus suspensions. So, yes, you might be coming in as a second choice potentially, but you're still going to get a lot of game time. I like Sosa. I think this is a deal that makes sense. So hopefully, we can perhaps crack on with it. But I mean, George, that seems like a pretty good place to round out, really. Covered a lot tonight, been a packed show. Enjoyed it as always. Obviously, still no news really, apart from just kind of monitoring, interested in, etc., all that nonsense. But nothing concrete has happened yet, really, with incomings or outgoings. Hopefully, in the next week, we'll have some news on Jules Koundé, hopefully being signed, update on Romelu Lukaku's future, plus hopefully a few more in the door. But until then, yeah, not much else to go through. Guys, thank you so much for getting involved in the chat. Really appreciate all your interaction, all your comments in there. It's great to have you involved in the shows. Make sure you smash a like on this stream if you haven't done already. Please do click that subscribe button. Guys, if you're watching now and you're not subscribed, please subscribe to the channel. It really helps us out. We're on the road to 1K now. We've passed the 500 mark. So let's get ourselves further towards that 1K mark. Every subscriber helps. So please do click the subscribe button if you haven't done already. Varna, very quickly on keepers, mate. No news really on keepers. Kepa still not out. We're potentially interested in Lazio keeper Stokosha, I think is his name, on a free transfer if Kepa were to move on. Slalina, I think he's called, the young goalkeeper from Chicago Fire. That deal should be wrapped up fairly soon. And we're interested in a very young goalkeeper from Southampton who I think we've signed, which is one for the development squad. So, yeah, nothing concrete on goalkeepers there. But, yeah, guys, as I said, please smash a like on the video. Please make sure you subscribe to the channel, spread the word. And until next time, guys, take care. Enjoy the rest of your weekend and up the Chelsea.